What's up everyone? Today I'm going to review one of the most important games of all time, Doom. What can be said about Doom? It's one of the best first-person shooters of all time, as it revolutionized the first-person shooter genre, and it was so successful that at the time the shareware version was installed on more than 10 million computers, and it gave Windows 95 a big run for its money. That's big success for ya. The game was developed by id Software, who prior to Doom, they made Commander Keen and Wolfenstein 3D. The game was produced by John Carmack, Dave Taylor, and of course, John Romero, who after Doom, he went out creating his own studio, Ion Storm, and he created Daikatana, one of the worst games ever made. So, in case you're wondering, does Doom still holds up? Let's find out. Buckle up because this is going to be a big ride to hell. The premise of Doom is quite simple. You're a Marine who works alongside UAC, which is the Union Aerospace Corporation, a military contractor which performs secret experiments on interdimensional travel. However, suddenly something goes wrong, and Pokemons from the Hell region swarm out of the teleportation gates on Deimos and Phobos. Because of this, the bases are quickly invaded by these Pokemons. Even worse, people are killed and some of them turn into zombies. You, the lonely Marine, who realizes that he's the only survivor, your job is to terminate all of these Pokemons and bring peace to the universe. As you can see, the story of Doom and Doom 2, which we'll get to in a minute, is not that important. Gameplay is much more important, and this is where Doom shines. The gameplay in Doom is very simple. Your main objective is simply to kill enemies from hell, getting keys to unlock doors, avoid hazards like acid, waste, sellings that can curse the player, you name it. And this objective has been implemented in several FPS games like Blood, Duke Nukem 3D, and Quake. However, nowadays, most FPS games are pretty linear and don't involve around getting keycards and secrets, except in Doom 2016, which the keycards feature has returned. Now let's talk about the weapons in the game. Doom has in total 8 weapons, the first 5 being the stereotypical weapons you find in every old school FPS game after Doom. When you start the game, you start only with your pistol and your fists. The pistol is pretty weak, as you likely use other weapons that are much stronger than the pistol. So if you encounter a shotgun or a plasma rifle, avoid the pistol at all costs. The shotgun is probably one of the most iconic weapons in the history of FPS games. It deals tons of damage against enemies at close range, but in long range it's kinda useless as it deals little to no damage. You'll likely use this precious shotgun like 90% of the game, and trust me, you'll feel like a badass when you use this awesome gun against these enemies of hell. The chain gun is a superior version of the pistol, and it shoots bullets like no one's business. It's pretty useful against most of these enemies, especially zombies and cacodemons, not to mention against hordes of imps. However, the chain gun eats ammo like no tomorrow, so be aware. Also, fun fact, this weapon is based off of a toy minigun named Tootsie Toy Old Painless. Wow, what a bizarre name, but weird name aside, it's actually a pretty cool reference. The rocket launcher is one hell of a weapon, as it can fire rockets and they explode when they hit anything solid. It deals heavy damage and it's very useful against hordes of enemies, not to mention it also deals splash damage, so that's pretty cool. However, do not use the rocket launcher at close range, as it can kill you even if you have 200% health and max armor. But come on, let's be honest, I'm sure nobody would have used the weapon at close range, am I right?
That's a lot of damage!
The plasma rifle is like a chain gun 2.0. Its damage rate is pretty high, and the game would be pretty hard without it, and as well as the BFG 9000. The gun is devastating against everything, including the bosses of Doom, and it makes a Baron of Hell cry like an anime fan on prom night. The chainsaw is an odd weapon, but one hell of a useful weapon, as it can help you save your ammo and also pretty useful against demons and specters. However, against Barons of Hell, it's pretty useless as it can still damage you and you likely want to use something else against these idiots. A chainsaw found on Phobos or Mars pretty odd because you never see a soldier using it, but who cares, it's pretty awesome. And last but not least, the BFG 9000, also known as the Big Funky Gun. It's considered the best weapon in the game. You thought the plasma rifle was OP? Try this one for size. This weapon could blast a green plasma ball, and if it hits a solid wall or an enemy, it explodes and causes heavy damage against hordes of enemies, as not only explodes, but it deals a heavy splash damage against surrounding enemies. The weapon itself is useful against bosses like the Cyber Demon and the Spider Mastermind. Also, fun fact, in the beta version of the BFG 9000 was originally capable of firing the deadly rapid-fire green and red plasma shots. Unfortunately, this would change because according to John Romero, he said that the deadly rapid-fire plasma shots would greatly slow down the entire game, and the idea was scrapped, because it looked like Christmas according to him. Overall, the weapon roster on Doom was, and still to this day, pretty awesome to use against the evil forces of hell, and it makes you feel like a badass when you load them to bits. And speaking of enemies, the enemy roster in Doom is pretty good, and also pretty deadly, as it can pose a lethal threat in a higher difficulty. The Zombie Man and the Shotgun Man are pretty easy to kill, and both of them drop ammo for you. They are weak, however, the Shotgun Man can be dangerous if you fight him at close range, so be careful. Imps, or I would like to call the Camel Men, they fire a fireball if you are far away from them, or they can scratch you if you're at close range. Just like the former Sergeant, it can be easily killed with a shotgun, however, imps most of the time come in packs, so using a rocket launcher or a chain gun is pretty useful against them. Also, remember when I called the imp the Camel Man? Well, it's because the imp's death sounds are stock sound bites of a camel grunt, or to be more specific, a Bacterian camel mating call. Yes, you heard that right, sound bites of a camel grunt. That's freaking awesome. The demon, also known as the Pinky, it's pretty fast and he can bite you. Luckily, the chainsaw is his weakness, as he can attack you while you attack him with the chainsaw. There's also an invisible version of the demon, also known as the Spectre. They are much harder to kill than the regular ones, so good luck. The Lost Souls are pretty annoying. They can launch themselves towards you at the speed of light, and they can deal huge damage at you. Usually Lost Souls are often found in groups. Using the chain gun or the plasma rifle is useful because of their 100% paint chains. The Cacodemon is possibly the most iconic enemy in the franchise, and it's also the cutest of them all. Its unique design is pretty good, in my opinion, and that smile is freaking priceless. So how does he attack you, you might ask? Well, he attacks you by shooting a fireball at you, and or biting you if you're at close range. Though pretty menacing visually, it's pretty easy to take him down, and it's pretty slow, and their paint chains is pretty high if you use a chain gun or the plasma rifle. The Baron of Hell is the first boss of Doom. It's very hard to kill, especially if you don't have the plasma rifle, the rocket launcher, or the BFG 9000, as you will have a pretty bad time, especially they can deal pretty heavy damage to the player. However, it's not as dangerous as the Cyber Demon or the Spider Mastermind. The Cyber Demon is the second boss of Doom, and it's pretty lethal against the player, as it can kill the player with one rocket, and even if the player has 200% health and maximum armor, it can still deal pretty heavy damage to the player. However, if you know how to circle strafe, you can dodge its rockets with ease. Also, just use the BFG 9000 on him, the same goes for the Spider. The Spider Mastermind is the boss of both 3rd and 4th episode of Doom. And while not as menacing or dangerous as the Cyber Demon, its chain gun attack is devastating. Also, since it's pretty big, it's recommended to use the BFG or the rocket launcher. The enemies in Doom were, and still to this day, pretty unique and well designed. My personal favorite is the Cacodemon because of its design, and it can pose a threat if you don't know what you're doing. The difficulty of Doom is, to be honest, pretty easy, even on Ultra Violence. But however, there is another difficulty named Nightmare, and it's one hell of a difficulty level. So why it's there in Doom, you might ask? Well, you see, Nightmare mode was added because many people, including myself, felt that the game was too easy on Ultra Violence. So its software added this skill level as a joke. But why? Well, the Nightmare mode is much harder than Ultra Violence. The monsters respawn after a while, after you kill them, but that's the least of our worries. Not only do they respawn, but they also run and attack faster than ever before. Also, the Shotgun Boy's accuracy is at their max, and they also deal a lot of damage as well. My experience with Nightmare Mode was like this.
Alright, I gotta leave, okay?
John, we just started. Come on, man.
Listen, there's a lot to see in this life. Not wasting it here.
Also, the Pinkies as well as the Spectres are much faster in Nightmare Mode. Much faster than a blue hedgehog, I might say. Because it's like you're giving over 9,000 pounds of sugar to a demon and they go full ballistic on you. That's Nightmare Mode in a nutshell, guys. Prepare to die a lot in this mode. And Nightmare Mode makes Ultraviolence look like a cakewalk, as if Ultraviolence wasn't easy enough already. There's even a warning sign that says, "Are you sure? This skill level isn't even remotely fair." So, stay away from Nightmare Mode unless you really are masochistic enough to deal with this stupid skill level. Moving on. The level design in Doom, while not as complex as the levels of Duke Nukem 3D and Blood, at the time it was pretty amazing. You could go upstairs, ride elevators, turn switches on and off. Also, the levels never feel the same. Also, there's a lot of secrets in each level. Some of them the secrets that lead to extra levels. That's why Doom encourages you to explore every nook and cranny in every level. Not to mention that the enemy placement is pretty great, as sometimes when you grab a key, they can ambush you, but it doesn't go overboard with that, so relax. Doom has 3 episodes, 4 if you count the Ultimate Doom version. The first episode, Knee Deep in the Dead, takes place in UAC installations in Phobos. The levels in this episode were mostly designed by John Romero, whereas the 4th level was designed by Tom Hall. This episode is present in the shareware version of Doom. The second episode, Shores of Hell, takes place in the UAC installation, but this time in Deimos. All the levels of the second episode were designed by Tom Hall and Sandy Peterson. The third episode, Inferno, is set in Hell, and once again, the levels were designed by Tom Hall and Sandy Peterson. And the 4th episode, Thy Flesh Consume, and it's probably the hardest episode in the entire game, the levels were designed by Kevin Cloud and John Romero, and also Tom Willits. This episode was included in the Ultimate version of Doom, and this episode takes place after Doom 1 and before Doom 2. Fun fact, did you know the second level of episode 4, Perfect Hatred, John Romero made this level in just 6 hours. God damn, John, you must have had a lot of tricks up in your sleeve when you made that level. Dude, I salute you. My favorite episode of Doom is the second episode, Shores of Hell, due to its atmosphere, design, and also the music. The third and the fourth episodes aren't too shabby either. The first episode is good, but not as good as the others, but that's just my opinion. There's also power-ups in Doom. The Soul Sphere gives you 100 additional health, and it can be found in secrets. The Berserk Pack, which not only restores you health, but it makes your fist 10 times stronger than before, and is very useful for saving ammo. And also the Invisibility Orbs grants you invisibility for a while. The graphics in Doom looked pretty amazing at the time. The lightning effects were jaw-dropping, the weapon sprites were, and still to this day, pretty well detailed, and so as the enemy sprites. They were pretty detailed at the time, and when they die, their corpse remain on the ground for endless amount of time. Their animation are pretty smooth for a 1993 DOS game. Like, you couldn't do this on a Super Nintendo, or even on a Mega Drive or Sega Genesis. The music in Doom is excellent in my opinion. Who could not forget this?
Finally, some good fucking food.
This has to be one of the most badass soundtracks I've ever heard in my entire life. All of Doom music was composed by Robert Prince, who also composed the soundtrack of Rise of Triad, Wolfenstein 3D, and of course Duke Nukem 3D. Most of the soundtrack was heavily inspired by popular rocks and metal songs at the time from groups like Pantera, Slayer, Alice in Chains, and of course Metallica. The sound effects are decent nowadays, but pretty awesome to hear when this game was released. The weapons sounded realistic at the time, especially the shotgun. The enemies also made pretty good sounds. However, most of the enemies like the demons, barons, and also the cacodemons have the same pain sound. Nevertheless, they make creepy sounds when they see you. This gives a great atmosphere to the game. After the enormous success of Doom, it should come with no surprise that id Software wanted to make a sequel of Doom, and the sequel was Doom 2: Hell on Earth. The sequel was released on September 30, 1994, and it sold 2 million copies. It was considered by most of the Doom community an improvement over the previous game Doom. But why it's superior? Well, let's find out. The plot of Doom 2 takes place after the events of Doom 1. The Doom guy returns to Earth only to find out that the Earth has been invaded by demons, and he's about to rip and tear these demon bastards for invading his homeland. Just like with the plot of Doom, the story of Doom 2 isn't that important in the game. Gameplay is. The gameplay on Doom 2 didn't change at all, and while it may be considered a bad thing, there's one significant addition to the game, and that is the Super Shotgun. If you thought the shotgun was perfect, let me introduce you to the greatest weapon ever made in the history of video games, the Super Shotgun. As the name implies, it deals twice the damage than the generic shotgun. Yes, it consumes double the amount of ammo, but it's pretty powerful against the cacodemons and the new enemies in Doom 2. And speaking of the new enemies, there's a lot of new enemies in Doom 2, and there are no pushovers whatsoever. They are pretty threatening. The chain gun men are much deadlier than the shotgun men. They have chain guns and they have a tendency to appear in groups, and close range encounters with the chain gun men can get you killed if you're a sitting duck against them. A super shotgun or a rocket launcher can dispose of them pretty quickly. The Hell Knight is the weaker brother of the Baron of Hell, and even though it's much easier to kill this time, it's just as deadly as the Baron of Hell, so be careful. The Arachnotron is the smaller version of the Spider Mastermind, and while their attacks can be easier to avoid, their high rate of fire can drain the player's health like no tomorrow. A super shotgun or a plasma rifle is useful against them. The Mancubus, also known as the Extra Demon, fires fireballs at you and they can deal pretty heavy damage to the player. However, since they have a very high paying chance, using the chain gun or the plasma rifle is pretty useful. The Revenant, also known as the Skeleton Boy, can fire homing missiles at you, so good luck dodging these pesky missiles. Not only that, but they can punch you, so don't use your fists against them, even if you have the Berserk pack, because he will likely win. The Archvile, also known as
Here comes Flame Boy,
is one of the most dangerous enemies in the game. He runs fast, and he is capable of burning you into vacant bits. Not only that, he can also resurrect enemies. What an annoying brat. If you encounter one of those, use the freaking BFG 9000. And last but not least, the Pain Elemental.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
If you thought the Lost Souls were annoying, you haven't seen nothing yet. This floating meatball can create Lost Souls, and as I said before, these idiots can block your missiles and you will die. If you see a Pain Elemental, use the BFG 9000. The level design in Doom 2 is 10 times better than the level of Doom 1. And yes, while the levels of Doom 1 were iconic and great, the levels of Doom 2 are much more complex and more detailed, making the levels of Doom 1 look like trash. The levels themselves are much more detailed this time around. Its software pushed the engine to its absolute limits. The levels such as Downtown and The Living End looked amazing, the former being pretty realistic at the time, because no other first-person shooter game at the time when Doom was released had the amount of detail like this level. However, in my opinion, I feel like the levels of Duke Nukem 3D, especially the city levels, are much better than Doom 2 city levels. But that's just my opinion. The game also has a pretty awesome Easter egg. It actually has 2 secret levels, and those 2 levels are from Wolfenstein 3D. How cool is that? However, the German version of Doom 2 unfortunately doesn't have these 2 levels, cause you know, German soldiers and all that fun stuff. The difficulty in Doom 2 is much harder than the previous game, but that's to be expected since the new enemies in conjunction with the new complex levels like the Gauntlet, Living End, you name it, keeps the player on their toes. I mean, you're a Doom Slayer, you have to be hardcore enough to deal with these demons, right? The levels of Doom 2 were created by Sandy Peterson, American MG, and Sean Green. Fun fact, in the final level in Doom 2, if you use the no-clip mode, you can actually see John Romero's head inside the final boss brain. Pretty neat, huh? He also says, however, if you put it in reverse,
to win the game you must kill me, John Romero.
That's pretty neat, huh? The music in this game is superb, composed by once again Robert Prince, and compared to the soundtrack of Doom, I can safely say that Doom 2 soundtrack is just as good as the soundtrack of Doom. It creates an excellent atmosphere of creepiness and adrenaline to everybody's ears. The sound effects are a little bit better than Doom 1. The super shotgun sounds much louder and better than the regular shotgun, not to mention that the new enemy sounds are pretty good and menacing. I have nothing else much to say about the sound effects of Doom 2, so I'll move on to the final verdict. So, what's my final verdict on Doom and Doom 2? Pretty damn good. Doom is considered one of the most important games ever as it revolutionized the FPS genre. The gameplay is excellent, the music is top notch, and the graphics are fantastic. Doom 2 made some good quality life improvements and is superior than Doom from its non-linear levels, new enemies, and new music. Both of these games never gets old. To this day, there's a lot of fan-made mods, remakes, soundtracks, fan arts, you name it. Doom is everywhere. You can buy both of these games on Steam for dirt cheap. Also, there are source ports that can enhance the player's experience. I recommend you using GZ Doom, as it not only supports high resolution settings, but also supports mods, and tons of mods. Trust me, you're gonna have a great time with this. Had Doom not been released, the world of gaming would never been the same. So Doom and Doom 2, you were and still to this day amazing. So, thanks for existing.